Lizzie here, and I'm going to share a story and extend an invitation and see whether there's something in it for you. Okay, so it was just the other night. I was doing something that happens to me on occasion. Maybe it happens to you. I stayed up way too late, and I started kind of just doing the internet thing and following one curious strand that led to another curious strand, and ended up falling upon an article that I found particularly interesting for more than one reason. Okay, so just a little bit of background for you. Some months ago, I read a book that was written by a man named David Wilcock called The Source Field Investigations. Very, very interesting read. Whether or not you buy any of that stuff, I think it's definitely good for mind-opening experiments, like I talked about in my last little story. So yeah, David Wilcock, Source Field Investigations, definitely give it a shot. So anyway, so I read that, and so then, of course, like usually if I read someone's book, I'm like, oh, so who is this person? I want to learn a little bit more about them. So I start Googling his name, and then what I started seeing more and more were all of these little links saying, you know, is he the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce? Okay, so I'm outing myself a little bit as I talk about some of the things that I find really fascinating. Okay, so again, whether or not you believe in reincarnation or whether or not you particularly appreciate David Wilcock or think that he is presenting, you know, valid scientific investigations or not, that's really not so much what matters in relation to the story and what I got from it. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to see if you can just kind of let that go or hold that part lightly. Okay. So anyway, so cool. All this kind of research saying, or his own research and other people saying that maybe he is the reincarnation of a man named Edgar Cayce, who some of you may recognize as one of the great psychics of the late 19th, early 20th century. And not just that, just really interesting guy. So anyway, I thought, oh, that's interesting. Let me see, you know, why do they say that? Why would they think that this is the case? And so I just was kind of reading here and there and browsing and stuff. And then I came to this one article where it was sharing a little bit about Edgar Cayce's background and how, you know, he was, you know, prolific in so many ways and just had accomplished so much in his life. But there were certain things in his life that he just didn't master, you could say. And again, not really relevant whether this is a true reincarnation incident or whether reincarnation happens. Not really what this is about. Okay, but anyway, he was very, very interested himself in reincarnation, and he had predicted that he himself would come back, you know, in the 1900s, the late 1900s, and kind of continue the work that he had begun. And so one thing that I thought was really interesting were the things, like, I don't know how the article actually did it, but it kind of set it up where you could kind of say, like, these are the 5 things that he just didn't really get to sort of work through in his lifetime, that he was hoping to work through in the next one, which may or may not be David Wilcock's. Anyway. Okay, and so, like, for example, one was, you know, even though he was super psychic and had written a lot and had made a huge impact on the psyches of a lot of people who benefited from his wisdom and his knowledge, there were certain things in his personal life he never really got together, issues around self-care with his body, substance issues, overeating, what else did they say? Like, he always wished that he took a daily journal of his dreams because he got so much information through his dreams, but he wasn't able to really turn it into an everyday practice for many years in the consistent way that he hoped to, and then, you know, a few more things. And so in this particular article, the whole point was to show that the things that he didn't actually get to in that life, David Wilcock got to in his life, you know, that in the early part of his life, he really, you know, had to work through his own relationship to food and actually mastered it and got to a place where he was taking good care of himself, and that if you know anything about him, he's become, like, unbelievably practiced and disciplined in recording his dreams and really offering a lot of insight and interesting entertainment to the world through the messages that he gets through those dreams. So anyway, again, doesn't matter, same soul, no soul, nothing like that, but just the whole concept I found really interesting. Like, what if our souls had a to-do list over a really, 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 really long span of time? And in each lifetime, like, we're supposed to check off a few of those things, but we don't have to check it all off. You know, we say, okay, we're going to check off a few things on our list, and then next time around we'll get to those other things. There was something about, I don't know, like just thinking about my life in that way that was such a relief, because I think sometimes, and of course I'm not saying, you know, be lazy because you can always get to it in the next life. That's not what I'm saying at all. But to the part of you that may be sometimes hard on yourself, or that may bite off more than you can chew, or think that you should be able to, you know, not just be a yogi, but write 100 books, or, you know, and then also have, you know, the most wonderful romantic love relationship and have lots of kids, but travel the world and do all this. I don't know if you're that kind of person, but I think a lot of us tend to set really high standards for ourselves that sometimes just make it really hard for us to just be present with what is and embracing what is, and maybe also owning and claiming those things that are most important to us, you know, and just saying, well, you know what, maybe it's not in the cards for me to be a yogi this time around, but you know, I'm serving people through my private practice, and I'm really enjoying that. I'm making a difference in my daughter's life, and I'm really enjoying that. You know, and maybe I'll get to it in the rest of the stuff in another life. Or maybe I've done all that other stuff before and I don't have to worry so much this time. So I guess this is my invitation to you, is to just think, just kind of play around with this whole possibility, right? We're working on opening our minds to possibilities, that your soul is so much older and so much bigger and so much more marvelous and expansive and experienced than what you probably have access to in any given moment in your consciousness right now, in normal daily consciousness. And that right now you've got this life, this one wild and precious life as exactly you. This will never be repeated. And what are the most important things? Like, what do you notice about your life are the most important things to you? Like, based on what you have been prioritizing, you know? Like, friendship is something worthy of prioritizing. And like, okay, so this is kind of interesting. Like, I know this woman in Denmark who is like a phenomenal artist. I mean, she is like one of the most prolific glass artists and painters that I have ever met. She's turned her whole house and a whole school into her own personal museum. And the artist in me can look at her and say, how does she do that? Why can't I do that? What, am I so lazy? What am I prioritizing that makes me not do that? And then I realized, well, you know what? Friends are really important to me. Friends are super important to me. And that may be like on the top of my soul's checklist or to-do list for this particular lifetime. You know, maybe I've been an artist before, great famous artist, and maybe I'll be an artist in another lifetime. But actually, if I really look at my life, what are the things that I really prioritize? They're my intimate relationships. And what if I really honored that and said, you know what? That's a really valid priority for a life. You know, to love in the small ways. So I have no idea if I'm making any sense, but I want to ask you to just look at your life, notice what you've already prioritized, and see whether there's a way that you can appreciate that and own that as what this life may actually be about. It doesn't mean that you can't take on these other things, or that they won't organically move to the forefront as other things go to the back front or the background. But if there is this voice in your head always comparing yourself to other people and saying, why aren't I doing more of that, or why aren't I more prolific, or why aren't I more successful, and why isn't my body more healthy, or why isn't, you know, blah blah blah. If you're doing that to yourself, then I'm speaking to you, because that's not really helping, and chances are you're actually living a really, really beautiful life. And who knows, maybe there'll be some David Wilcock in the future that can just pick up where you left off. So you don't have to do it all. You don't have to do it all. All right. Hope that helps a little bit. Bye.